hallway full of laughter turned into stunned silence when a shy new girl, known only for her quiet footsteps and stitched floral dress, suddenly dropped 3 bullies in under 10 seconds. Josephine Ammons wasn't looking for trouble. She just wanted to survive her first week at Oak Ridge High. But when cruelty crossed a line and humiliation became public spectacle, something inside her snapped, not out of anger, but out of memory. Years of secret training with her father, a man who believed peace was earned through control, came flooding back. Now, a viral video has turned her into a symbol, but for what? A fighter? A threat? Or something the world isn't ready to define just yet? Josephine Ammons didn't speak when she entered the building. She didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't try to blend in or stand out. She just walked. Shoulders tucked in, chin slightly down, books hugged to her chest like a shield. Her floral dress brushed against her knees with each step, carefully stitched by her own hands the night before. It was her armor. Not loud, not flashy, just enough color to say I'm here, but quiet enough to hope no one noticed. But someone always noticed. From the top of the stairs, Chloe Harper leaned against the railing like a queen surveying her court. Hair curled to perfection, glossy lips pouted in practiced boredom. Chloe didn't miss a single movement in the hallway. She never did. Her friends, Madison Lang and Bella Grant, stood just behind her, laughing too loud and for no reason at all. Chloe narrowed her eyes. "There she is again," she said, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "Little house on the prairie." Madison laughed. "She looks like she made that dress in a cave." Bella snorted. "Bet she doesn't even have TikTok." Chloe grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. "She thinks she's invisible. That's the problem." Josephine kept her head down, her steps quiet. She knew they were watching. She always knew. The floor squeaked in a certain way when someone followed too close. The air shifted when they were about to pounce. Years of learning how to breathe without making noise had taught her these things. Years of learning how to survive. She reached her locker. Bottom row, middle hallway, under the flickering light, and began turning the dial. Madison's voice sliced through the hallway. "Aw, look at her. She dressed up like she has somewhere to be." Chloe's heels clicked against the tile as she stepped closer, her voice syrupy and sharp. "Hey, Josephine," she cooed. "Who made your dress? Your grandma?" Josephine didn't answer. Chloe's smile faltered. "What? You too good to talk to us?" Still, Josephine stayed silent. She didn't flinch, didn't turn. Her locker clicked open. She placed her books inside, neatly, one by one. Bella stepped forward. "She's weird." Madison raised her phone. "Let's make her famous." The crowd hadn't gathered yet, but it always did. Oak Ridge High had a sixth sense for cruelty. The phones came out before the punchline, laughter bubbling just beneath the surface, hungry and waiting. "Sis," Chloe's voice hardened. "I said, who made your dress?" Josephine turned her head, just slightly, enough to meet Chloe's eyes. Not with anger, not with fear, just stillness. That made Chloe furious. Without warning, her hand shot out. She grabbed the back of the dress and yanked. The sound was sharp, a rip, loud and sudden, like paper tearing in church. Josephine gasped, but not out of fear, out of grief. The seam across her shoulder split open, fabric fluttering to her elbow. Her mother's old tablecloth, sewn with care into something beautiful, now dangled like a joke. Laughter exploded. Phones lit up. Bella laughed so hard she doubled over. Madison zoomed in, recording. And Chloe stepped back, like she had just won a game. Josephine didn't move. Her fingers touched the torn fabric, trembling. Something flickered in her chest. Not fire, not rage. Stillness. Then she straightened. No one saw it coming. The first strike came fast. Bella closest, reached out again, probably to push or shove or mock. Josephine spun. Her hand came up smooth as water and caught Bella's wrist midair. One step forward, one pivot. Bella's body flipped sideways and slammed into the lockers with a metal clang. She slid down, dazed, her mouth open but empty of sound. Madison screamed. Chloe took a step back. Josephine turned. Madison raised her phone like a shield. "You're crazy." She lunged. Josephine ducked low, swept her foot out, and knocked Madison's legs from under her. The phone hit the floor first, then her elbow, then her pride. Her whimper was muffled by the sound of gasps. Chloe froze, her body taut, her eyes wide. "Don't come near me," she hissed. Josephine didn't speak. She stepped in. Chloe pulled out a phone of her own, fumbling, shaking. "I'll call security. You're gonna be expelled, you freak." Josephine's body twisted, clean fluid, and her open palm struck Chloe square on the collarbone. Not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to drop her. Chloe collapsed to her knees, clutching her chest, her breath knocked clean out of her. The hallway was dead silent. Phone still pointed, fingers still hovered. But the laughter, gone. Josephine adjusted her torn dress, picked up her book bag. She didn't rush. She didn't explain. Her eyes scanned the faces, wide-eyed, uncertain, some amazed, some afraid, and then she walked, one foot in front of the other, like nothing happened. Only Derek Ammons, back home in a living room quiet with memory, might have recognized what just occurred. Only he would know that his daughter hadn't snapped. She had remembered. In his words, "You don't fight to hurt. You fight to protect your peace." Josephine didn't fight because she was angry. She fought because she had finally had enough. And because, maybe for the first time in her life, someone was watching. Josephine's footsteps echoed in her ears, even though the hallway had fallen into a hush. Behind her, the three girls remained where they had fallen, stunned, gasping, holding onto their bruised pride and aching bones. No one dared speak her name, not yet, not out loud. They all just watched. Phones lowered slowly, fingers hovering over screens, like they were afraid that even posting about her might bring her attention. She didn't look back. The silence stretched long, like the space between thunder and lightning. She rounded the corner. Once she was out of sight, her breath came faster. Her grip on the strap of her bag tightened. Her heart slammed against her ribs like it wanted out. The quiet confidence she carried in the moment before? Gone. Her body remembered the movement, but her mind hadn't caught up. In the girls' restroom, she pushed open the door and staggered to the nearest sink. The mirror met her eyes. Her reflection didn't look different, but it felt different. The dress hung awkwardly now, ripped at the shoulder, the fabric flaring out like a flag in retreat. Her eyes, they weren't wild, but focused. A calm before and after the storm. Her hand shook as she splashed cold water on her face. Then she stared again, not at the girl who had fought, but at the girl who hadn't wanted to. Josephine never wanted to make a scene. She never wanted to be noticed. That was the unspoken rule of being her in a place like Oak Ridge. If you're quiet, if you're small, if you're still, they'll pass over you. They'll forget you. They won't bother. But they had bothered anyway. She pulled some paper towels from the dispenser, patting her face dry, trying not to tear up again. Not from the fight, from the dress. From the torn piece of home she wore like a second skin. She traced the frayed seam where Chloe had yanked it, and her jaw clenched. She heard the restroom door creak open behind her. "Josephine?" Her body tensed. But the voice wasn't cruel, it was soft, unsure. She turned slowly. It was a girl named Alina. quiet, like her. Sat 3 rows behind her in science, wore glasses too big for her face, and always had ink smudges on her fingers from doodling in the margins of her notebook. Alina stepped inside, glancing over her shoulder first, like she didn't want to be seen. That was... She trailed off, eyes wide. That was insane! Josephine didn't respond. Alina smiled nervously. I mean, cool. It was cool. Like, insanely cool. Sorry. Josephine looked back at the mirror. I didn't mean to do it. But they deserved it, Alina said quickly. Everyone knows they're awful. No one's ever stood up to them before. Josephine just breathed. Alina reached into her backpack, pulled out a small safety pin, and offered it like a peace offering. For your dress. Josephine hesitated, then took it. Thanks, she said softly. Alina smiled wider. You know, you kinda looked like you were dancing, but like fighting too. I don't know how to describe it. It was like watching a movie. Josephine didn't correct her, because that's exactly how it was taught. Fluid, controlled, efficient. A dance made from survival. At home, it was always quiet. Her father didn't talk much during training. He believed in repetition, in breathing, in letting the body learn faster than the mouth could speak. Derek Ammons had trained in silence, taught her in silence. On a carpet worn thin in a living room that always smelled like old books and peppermint tea. He never told her to fight at school. He never said to hide it either. He just said, people won't understand it until they need it. She'd needed it today. But now came the part she feared more than the fight. She stepped out of the restroom, and the whispers started immediately. People moved out of her way. Some stared. Others looked down, pretending they hadn't seen anything. But she felt their eyes. Every single one. In first period, the teacher paused when she entered. For a second too long. It resumed. Said nothing. She sat in the back, as always. The seat felt colder than usual. Alina slid into her own seat and gave her a small thumbs up. Josephine didn't return it, but something about it steadied her. At lunch she sat alone, not because she wanted to, but because now everyone was either afraid or curious, and neither felt safe. She picked at her food while glancing at the exit, wondering if it was worth the risk to eat in the library. The whispers were growing louder. He dropped all 3 of them. No warning, just bam. She didn't even yell. That's the creepiest part. She, like, trained or something? Deal with it? She's probably gonna get suspended. Good. I hope she does. Josephine pushed her tray aside. She didn't want to be feared, but she also didn't regret what happened. That's what made it confusing. She remembered Bella lunging, Chloe yanking, Madison recording, and then her body taking over, like breathing. In that moment, her tears had dried. Her fear had sunk somewhere deep beneath instinct. The hallway didn't see rage. It saw precision. But they didn't know the hours she spent just learning to block, to deflect, to move with grace even when the world pushed back hard. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. You fight for peace, not attention, not revenge, peace. The cafeteria doors opened. Madison entered with her arm in a sling. Chloe followed, pale, lips pressed tight, no bruises, but ego bleeding through her eyes. Bella was nowhere in sight. He didn't look at Josephine. They looked around her. She was no longer invisible. But she wasn't exactly seen either. She felt the shift. Even the adults were acting strange. No one had pulled her aside yet. No scolding, no principal's office, no counselor trying to check in, because they'd seen the video too. And no one knew what to do with a girl like her. When the final bell rang, Josephine didn't hurry to leave. She walked the same way she always did, quiet, steady. Outside, clouds rolled above the trees lining the school fence. She tightened her jacket over the ripped dress and made her way down the hill where the buses waited. Her stop was 3 blocks away. She always walked. It gave her time to think, time to breathe. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't look. Not yet. She reached the street corner, waited for the light, watched the cars pass by. When it turned green, she crossed with her head up. And just before reaching the other side, she heard someone call out from across the street. "Hey, you really dropped those girls, huh?" She turned. A boy her age, maybe a little older. Tall, braids, wide eyes. Not mocking at all, just interested. Josephine said nothing. The boy laughed and raised both hands in surrender. Okay, he said. Just if you ever start a club or something, I'd join. He gave her a small nod, then turned and walked away. Josephine didn't smile, but her grip on her bag relaxed. She walked the rest of the way home with the kind of stillness that isn't scared but ready. The storm had passed, but the sky wasn't clear yet. The next morning, Josephine woke before the alarm. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shape of yesterday still clinging to the air around her. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, the moment replayed in fragments. The sound of fabric tearing, Chloe's shriek, Madison's phone hitting the ground, Bella crumpling against the lockers. Then the silence, that deep, bone-quiet silence that followed. Not even in the tournaments with her dad had she felt that kind of stillness. Her fingers touched the torn seam of her dress, now hanging neatly on her bedroom door. She'd pinned it up after school, then spent an hour staring at it before finally folding it away. Not to throw it out, not to forget, just to keep it somewhere safe, where she could decide later if it meant something or not. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Her father had already left for his shift at the community center. He never left notes. He never said much at all, really. But in the kitchen, beside her lunchbox, was a small Tupperware filled with leftover rice and beans, a protein bar, and a folded napkin. She smiled faintly. That was his way of saying he saw the video, of saying he understood. She left the house with her earbuds in, walking the same route she always did, past the cracked sidewalks and iron fences and sleepy windows still closed against the morning chill. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the world had that blue-gay hue that made everything look softer, quieter. But she felt eyes, not real ones. Not yet, but she could already tell the day wasn't going to be quiet. When she reached Oak Ridge, the energy was different. It buzzed low, like an electric hum under the floor. The usual clusters of students were already forming, but now they parted slightly as she walked through, like water making way for a current it didn't want to test. She didn't look at them. She didn't have to. She could feel it, the shift. Some feared her. Others were curious. A few, just a few, seemed impressed. Inside, her locker waited just where she left it, untouched. Someone had scratched something into the metal above the combination dial, small and hasty. Karate freak. She didn't flinch, didn't brush it off. She just opened the locker, placed her bag inside, and closed it again. Behind her, a voice. Into you shift knocked her out for real. Josephine turned slowly. It was a boy named Mason, tall, light-skinned, always wearing a beanie pulled too far down. He grinned at her. She had it coming, he added. Chloe's been bullying people since like 6th grade. Glad someone finally clocked her. Josephine tilted her head slightly. I didn't clock her. He shrugged. Close enough. He walked away with a wave. Josephine stood there for a moment longer before heading to class. The rest of the morning passed in slow stretches. Teachers didn't bring it up, but their eyes lingered too long. Some offered her soft smiles, Others ignored her entirely. No one said a word about the video. But her classmates did. Whispers floated behind her like smoke. Even when she wasn't looking, she could feel their weight. In third period, a note slid onto her desk. It was folded into a neat triangle. She opened it carefully, hands steady. "How did you learn to fight like that?" "Will you teach me?" S. There was no name, no hint. She stared at it for a long moment before folding it back up and slipping it into her pocket. She wasn't sure what she was now. Not the weird new girl anymore, not invisible, but something else entirely. During lunch, she skipped the cafeteria. Instead, she went to the gym. It was mostly empty, just a few kids shooting hoops and Coach Granger sitting in his office, hunched over a clipboard. She found an empty corner, sat on the bleachers, and ate her lunch slowly. She liked the quiet here. The squeak of sneakers on the floor. The distant thud of a ball hitting the rim. But the peace didn't last. Bela entered. Not alone, two other girls flanked her. Jenna and Lexi, both from the cheer squad. They weren't laughing, weren't shouting, just staring. Josephine didn't move. Bella approached slowly, her lip curled in a way that wasn't quite a sneer, but not a smile either. "You think you're special?" she asked. Josephine blinked. "You think just because you caught us off guard yesterday, now you're untouchable?" Bella's voice dropped, bitter. "You humiliated us." Josephine stayed seated, her tray still in her lap. "I didn't humiliate anyone," she said softly. "You broke Madison's wrist." He shouted me. "You're not the victim," Lexi snapped. "You're violent." Josephine looked up at them, her voice calm. "No, I was provoked." "There's a difference." Bella stepped closer. "You think you can just go viral and everyone's gonna love you now?" Josephine didn't answer. Jenna pulled out her phone. "Say something, freak." "Let's see what everyone thinks of you now." Josephine's hands clenched around the edge of her tray. Not in fear, in control. Coach Granger's door creaked open then. "Everything okay out here?" his voice called. Jenna quickly hid the phone. Bella stepped back. "We were just leaving," Bella said smoothly. The three girls walked off, their presence still heavy in the air. Josephine didn't breathe until they were gone. The next 2 periods blurred. She focused on equations, on notes, on the way the pencil felt against the paper. She focused on anything but the looks, the mutters, the way some students walked past her slowly. Curious, like she was a lion in a cage. By the end of the day, the weight of the silence was heavier than any insult. On her way to her locker, she spotted Chloe, standing alone. For the first time, no one beside her. No Madison. No Bella. Her arms crossed tightly, her expression drawn. She looked up and saw Josephine, then quickly looked away. Not in fear. In shame. Josephine walked past her. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. Outside, the air was crisper than usual. Leaves danced along the sidewalk, and the sun had started to dip lower. She walked home the same way she always did, but with something new in her step. Not pride. Not power. Balance. That evening, her father returned home later than usual. She was in the living room, practicing breathing exercises, legs crossed, hands resting on her knees, eyes closed. He didn't say anything when he walked in, just paused in the doorway. She felt him watching, and he said, "You moved like you've been listening." Josephine opened her eyes, looked at him. "I have." He nodded once, then turned to the kitchen. That was the most praise he'd ever given. She smiled to herself. Later that night, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Saw what you did. You were amazing. Some of us needed to see that." No last name, no photo, but she read it twice. And then, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. Not because she was proud, but because maybe, just maybe, She hadn't fought for nothing. The sky was still dark when Josephine's eyes opened. Not because of an alarm, not from noise. She just knew it was time. Her body moved on instinct now, the same way it had in that hallway, the same way it always did when her thoughts grew too loud and her chest felt too full. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, stood, and padded quietly down the hallway barefoot, the cool floor grounding her as she moved into the living room. The carpet was familiar beneath her feet, worn in the exact spots she knew by heart. Her toes touched the place just left of the coffee table, right where the fibers had flattened from years of repetition. That's where she stood. That's where she breathed. That's where she learned to exist in a world that didn't want her to be too loud or too soft. Josephine dropped into a stance, slow and low, her knees bent, her hands hovered loosely in front of her chest. She closed her eyes. Inhale. Exhale. Again. The silence of the house wrapped around her like a blanket. She moved through the motions her father taught her since she was barely tall enough to reach his elbow. A slow jab, a block, a sidestep. Her body remembered every shape. She remembered her father's voice. Low, steady, like a drumbeat beneath a calm river. He never shouted instructions, never lectured. He let her move, let her fall, let her rise again. And when she got something wrong, he didn't correct her with words. He showed her with his own body, guiding her gently by the wrists or shoulders until the movement made sense. You don't fight to hurt. You fight to stay whole. At the time, she didn't understand what that meant, but now she thought maybe she did. When she finished her set, she dropped her arms and stood still, breathing slow, steady. The muscles in her arms tingled, not from strain, but memory. Behind her, a soft cough. She turned. Her father stood in the hallway, barefoot, arms crossed loosely over his chest. His gray t-shirt hung low over his frame, his expression unreadable. "Everything? I didn't wake you," she said softly. He shook his head. "I wake up when the house breathes different." Josephine tilted her head. "What does that mean?" He walked forward, slowly, settling onto the arm of the couch. "You fight quiet," he said. "Most people fight like they're trying to be heard, but not you. You fight like you're listening. That's different." Josephine didn't respond right away. She lowered herself onto the floor, cross-legged. She kept her eyes on her hands. "I didn't plan to fight," she whispered. "It just happened, She stopped. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because the memory still stung, deeper than just torn fabric. He nodded once. "And you didn't throw the first strike." "No, but you finished it." She looked up at him, her voice barely louder than her breath. "Does that make me wrong?" He considered her, then leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "When I was your age," he said, "I got jumped by 2 boys after school. Didn't know them, didn't even look at them. They didn't need a reason." "What did you do?" she asked. "I didn't fight back." Her eyes widened. "I didn't know how to. Not then," he continued. "So I curled up and waited for it to end. And it did, eventually. But something in me broke that day. Not a bone, not blood. Something else. Something deeper." He tapped a finger against his chest. "That's why I learned. And that's why I taught you." Josephine swallowed hard. "Because sometimes," he said, "not fighting back hurts more than any bruise." The living room was still. A distant hum of tires passed outside, early traffic waking up. Josephine reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the folded note from school, the one with only an initial. She handed it to him. He opened it, read it, raised an eyebrow. "She wants me to teach her," Josephine said. He handed it back. "You thinking about it?" She shrugged. "I don't know. You don't have to teach anyone," he said, "but maybe someone needs to learn something that has nothing to do with throwing punches." She nodded slowly. He stood up and stretched his arms over his head, joints popping lightly. "You're not broken," he said on his way back down the hall. "Don't let anyone convince you that you are." When he was gone, Josephine stayed there a moment longer, staring at the soft shadows on the wall. Later that morning at school, she didn't hide. She didn't shrink. The whispers were still there, yes. But they sounded different today, like admiration trying to disguise itself as fear. In history class, someone had drawn a cartoon on the whiteboard before the teacher arrived. It was crude, just a stick figure in a dress performing a flying kick. Underneath it, in blue marker, "Fear the Floral Fury." Laughter bubbled across the room when the teacher walked in and wiped it away without comment. Josephine didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. In the hallway, Chloe passed her for the first time in days. No posse, no attitude. Their eyes met for a second. And then Chloe looked away, not in fear, but in something that looked like understanding. Or regret. In English, the teacher handed out a writing prompt. Write about a time you chose to stay silent or speak up, and what happened next. Josephine stared at the paper. Her hand hovered over it, pen resting between her fingers. She didn't start writing right away. She just sat with the question. After class, Elena caught up with her by the lockers. "Hey," she said, breathless from jogging down the hallway. "Did you see the whiteboard?" Josephine nodded. "I think it was Mason who drew it." "Probably," Josephine said. Elena shifted on her feet. "You know, if you ever do want to teach someone or talk about it, I'd be into that." Josephine raised an eyebrow. "You want to learn how to fight?" Elena pushed her glasses up and smiled. "Maybe not fight, but like, know what to do and how not to feel scared all the time." Josephine thought for a moment. "Meet me in the gym tomorrow morning," she said, "before first period." Elena's eyes lit up. "Seriously?" "Bring shoes you can move in," Josephine added. Elena grinned. Done. That night, back home, Josephine sat in her room with the writing prompt still in her hand. She stared at the blank page, then finally began to write. Her first sentence wasn't about fighting. It wasn't even about Chloe, or Madison, or Bella. It was about her father, about the first time he showed her how to breathe through fear, about how staying silent sometimes protects you, but how speaking with your body, moving with purpose, can be louder than shouting. She didn't know how the story ended yet, but for the first time she was ready to find out. The clip was 47 seconds long. No edits, no music, no voiceover. Just grainy hallway footage, shaky hands, and 3 bodies hitting the floor one by one. By Monday morning, it had over 2.4 million views. Someone had captioned it, "Shy Black Girl Unleashes on Racist Bullies and Wins." Another version read, "Don't Mess with the Quiet Ones." There were reactions, duets, commentary videos dissecting each frame like it was a historic sports replay. The internet was spinning fast, and Josephine Ammons was the eye of the storm. She didn't even have a TikTok account. At school, the air was heavy again, but this time it buzzed with something stranger than fear. It buzzed with fascination. People didn't just look at her anymore. They whispered with urgency. They texted with thumbs flying. They tilted their phones in her direction, like capturing her would make them part of the story too. Josephine kept her head up. She wore a black hoodie over a white t-shirt and jeans. No floral dress, no symbols to target, just neutral armor. Her hair pulled back in a bun, her face calm. She felt everything beneath the surface, but she didn't let it show. Not yet. The morning announcements were read in a stiff voice, barely making it through the PA system crackle before the speaker cut off, but even that sounded distant. Everyone was too busy scrawling. Alina found her at her locker, practically bouncing. "You're famous," she whispered, wide-eyed. Josephine gave her a look. "Not helpful." "Okay, yeah, sorry," Alina said, trying to suppress a grin. "But seriously, you're like a legend now." "I didn't ask to be." "No, but you are." Josephine stared at her locker door. The scratch from a few days ago, "Karate Freak," had been scribbled over with marker. Someone else had written beneath it, "Queen of Peace," followed by a crown. She shuddered quietly and turned to Alina. "You still coming tomorrow morning?" "I'll be there." "Good. Bring someone if you want, but only people who show respect." Alina nodded solemnly. Josephine turned and walked to first period, where a substitute teacher passed around a worksheet no one looked at. Phones were hidden under desks. Glances slid sideways. A girl at the front of the class tapped away, probably live tweeting her morning in the same room as that girl. Halfway through the period, a soft knock on the door interrupted the silence. A student aide leaned in. "Is Josephine Ammons here?" Everyone looked. The substitute peered over her glasses. "Yes?" "She's needed in the office." Josephine rose. Every eye followed her as she walked out. The aide didn't speak on the way there, just walked, quick and quiet. When they arrived, the front office was strangely empty. The secretary behind the desk barely glanced up. The aide gestured toward the principal's office. Inside, Principal Rowan sat behind his desk, his posture unusually tight. Next to him was another man in a slate-gray blazer, a gold badge clipped to his belt. A counselor Josephine barely recognized sat with a tablet in her lap, blinking nervously. Josephine entered, stood tall. Principal Rowan motioned to the chair. "Have a seat, Josephine." But she sat. The man with the badge introduced himself. "Detective Marsh, School Resource Unit. I'm not here to scare you. Just want to make sure you're okay." Josephine nodded once. She didn't speak. "We've seen the footage," Principal Rowan said slowly. "I want you to know that. It's a complicated situation." Josephine raised an eyebrow. The counselor cleared her throat. "There's been a lot of online attention, some positive, some not. We're monitoring comments, but your safety is our top priority." Josephine tilted her head. "I'm not the one who started it." "I know," Rowan said quickly. "We're not saying you did." Marsh leaned forward. "What you did, Josephine, was technically self-defense. But we also know that things can escalate when the internet gets involved. There have been reporters calling the school." "I don't want to be interviewed." "That's your right," Marsh replied. "But they'll keep trying." Josephine stared down at her hands. "We're offering counseling," the woman said. "And we'd like to know if you'd be willing to speak at the upcoming assembly. Something short, about conflict resolution, leadership." Josephine looked up. Her voice was steady. "You want me to fix what they broke?" Roland blinked. "No, that's not what we're saying." "It's what you're asking." There was a pause. Marsh offered a small nod. "You're not wrong. But people are listening now. You could use that." Josephine stood. "I'm not doing this for them." "Then who are you doing it for?" Rowan asked, a little too sharp. She didn't answer. She walked out. That afternoon, the parking lot was crawling with local reporters and a couple of national outlets. Microphones, boom poles, cameras glinting under the sun. One woman with perfect teeth shouted Josephine's name across the pavement as she stepped off the curb. Josephine didn't pause. She walked through the noise like it didn't exist, like it couldn't touch her. At home, her dad was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, peeling an orange. He glanced at her, eyes steady. "They're saying you broke a girl's arm," he said. "She fell on it. They say you're some kind of hero." I'm not. Amy say you scared the whole school straight. I didn't mean to. He nodded once, handed her half of the orange. You're going to have to decide who you are, he said. I know. And so, she took the orange, peeled off a strip of rind and stared at it. Later that evening, she sat in her room watching video after video that people had posted, reactions from strangers, commentary from adults, even other kids, some angry, some proud, some just confused. One girl, maybe from another school, looked straight into the camera and said, I wish I had the courage to do what she did. Josephine clicked it off. She sat in the dark, phone in her hand, and didn't move for a long time. Then she opened her notebook. Not the one for school. The one with the blank pages. She wrote just one line. You don't fight to go viral. Then below it, another. You fight to be seen without having to scream. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. We're proud of you. Keep going. Anonymous. No name, just like before. But she knew it was someone at school. Someone who had seen the hallway. Maybe someone who had been quiet too long. She put the phone down. Tomorrow, she'd meet Alina in the gym. Maybe others would come. Maybe they'd all just be quiet and unsure. But they'd be there. And Josephine? She would be ready. The gym lights flickered on before sunrise. Josephine stood in the middle of the basketball court, hoodie sleeves rolled to her elbows, palms open and waiting. The air was cool, still holding the breath of night, but her body was warm, steady from her walk, calm from her stretches. She listened to the silence. It was her favorite sound before a storm or a beginning. And this felt like both. The doors creaked open behind her. She didn't turn. She heard sneakers on the polished floor, light footsteps, then more. By the time she looked back, Alina was there. Then Mason. Then two kids from her third period class. A girl with tight curls and a hoodie 2 sizes too big. A boy with nervous eyes and hands shoved deep in his pockets. 6 in total. All of them quiet. All of them watching her like they didn't know what to expect, only that they had to be there. Josephine nodded once. Shoes off, she said. One by one they slipped off their sneakers. They formed a line without being told. Waiting. She stepped in front of them. You don't need to be fast, she said. You don't need to be strong. You just need to be aware. No one spoke. She dropped into a stance, legs bent, hands lifted, and they copied her. You don't fight to win, she continued. You fight to stay whole. They stayed in place, listening, unsure. And then she moved. Slow, methodical, a jab, a sidestep, a block. They followed, imperfect, but focused. The silence of the gym filled with breath, with effort, with a rhythm that only they could hear. It wasn't about power, it wasn't about going viral, it was about control. And for the first time since that hallway, Josephine felt something shift, not just in her, but around her. After 15 minutes, she stopped. They exhaled in unison, like a single breath let go at last. Mason wiped sweat from his forehead and grinned. So, we going to do this every day? Josephine smirked. You gonna show up every day? He nodded. Bet. The others smiled too, shy, unsure, but something was blooming. Not just trust, respect. By the time the bell rang for first period, they had already agreed to meet again tomorrow. No one said goodbye. They just nodded and left one by one, leaving Josephine standing in the center of the court, alone again. But not really. She pulled her hoodie back on and left the gym with her backpack slung over one shoulder. The hallways weren't silent anymore. There were still whispers, but they were softer now. The fear had dulled. The stares were fewer. Some were even smiles. quiet, subtle, like nods in a language only some understood. In first period, her teacher handed back the writing assignment. Josephine stared at her paper. A small note at the top in red ink. "Would you be willing to read this at the assembly? Powerful stuff." She folded the paper slowly and tucked it away in her binder. The assembly had been planned for Friday, a student-led event, a chance, the school said, to heal and reflect. Josephine hadn't decided if she would speak. Until now. Friday arrived with little fanfare, but the auditorium was packed. Students filed in row by row, buzzing with curiosity. Teachers stood along the walls, a few parents, even some reporters tucked quietly in the back. Josephine stood behind the curtain, holding her paper. Her heart beat steady, not wild, not scared. Her father sat in the second row. He didn't wave, but she saw him. And he saw her. Principal Rowan gave a short introduction, vague, careful, then called her name. The room hushed. Josephine stepped onto the stage. No music, no spotlight, just her. She walked to the podium, her boots echoing softly against the wood floor, and looked out at a sea of eyes. Some waiting for something viral, others waiting for something real. She unfolded her paper and placed it flat in front of her. "My name is Josephine Ammons," she began, her voice clear. "I'm 14, I'm black, I'm quiet. And until last week, none of you knew who I was." A pause. "I didn't come to this school to be loud. I came here to learn, to breathe, to exist. But sometimes, existing feels like a battle. And last week, someone picked the wrong girl on the wrong day." A few students chuckled nervously. She didn't smile. "I didn't fight because I wanted to. I fought because silence had stopped working. I fought because I've been taught my whole life that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of control." The room was still. I didn't break anyone's bones. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I just remembered who I was. Her eyes scanned the room. "My dad taught me that you don't fight to hurt people. You fight to stay whole. That's what I did, and I won't apologize for it." Silence. Then one clap, then another, and in the whole room, not roaring, not explosive, but rising, wave after wave. Applause, not for spectacle, but for truth. Josephine stepped back. She didn't bow. She didn't need to. She just nodded once and walked off stage. Later that day, her floral dress hung back on her bedroom wall. The rip had been sewn. Not to make it perfect again, but to honor the tear. It had happened, and she was still here. That evening, her father knocked once before stepping into her room. He looked at the dress, then at her. "You spoke well," he said. "Thanks. You ready for what comes next?" "Truly." "I think so." He nodded and left. The next morning, the gym was full. Not bursting, but full enough. 12 students this time. All of them barefoot. All of them watching her, waiting to learn. Josephine stepped forward. He dropped into her stance and smiled, because peace, she had learned, isn't something you wait for. It's something you move toward. One breath, one block, one step at a time. And this time she wasn't alone.